Okay. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. Sorry, let me turn my video on. Sorry about that. Okay. Module 8. So, midterm. Now, for this class in SLP215, what I do want to say, the projects, the reason why I do this is because a couple different things. I think that these are what I would call, not that you won't have any incidences, but they're just lower incidences. And especially when we're looking at something like stuttering and executive function, hearing, you know, these are things that you will see throughout your career, but it's not going to be the predominant group that you'll see. And oftentimes, like, let's say you're working with someone with a hearing impairment. So for instance, I do have one particular student, he's got a cochlear implant. He's got double cochlear implants. And yes, he has a hearing impairment. We do use an interpreter. We also use an FM system for him. But a lot of what I still do is language based. It's not something specific. We do work on him relying less on the interpreter and more on his own hearing. But he's a complicated case. And a lot of what we do is just basic language 101. You know, does he understand the directions? Is he paying attention, reading what he should be? So oftentimes, hearing impairment is just one component of what you're doing with them, but in reality, it's pretty similar to some of your other things. So it's not always something specific or different that you're doing with someone who has a hearing impairment. Fluency is a little bit different. Oftentimes, they don't necessarily have other things going on. So it might just be fluency. So that looks different than somebody who's got executive function deficits and has deficits in a variety of areas, excuse me, a variety of areas. So midterm project instructions. So let's look, and I updated, okay, so the session plan, if you downloaded the old form, it's the same. I just don't like it saying lesson plan. I like it saying session plan because truly, I don't know. I guess that's me. I get hung up on semantics of it all, but really we're doing a session plan. And obviously we might be working on things or things that would look similar to a lesson plan, or we're going to be targeting a skill, but really this is what we plan to do in a session. But guess what? Things change, or we got to be flexible, especially in speech therapy sessions for sure. So goals. So let's review. So basically what you're doing, you'll receive possible treatment goals. So there's goals here. And you select 2 goals for each client. So, you know, 2 hearing impaired goals, 2 fluency goals, and 2 executive function goals. So, and basically what I want is, so you're going to write your selected goal in column 1, and then you're going to put your tasks, excuse me, hold on, let me edit this real quick, because I think it gets confusing. And actually I changed the points, sorry. Guys, we made updates to things, and I just need to update some of these points here. So you'll have 2 goals. So you pick 2 goals, and it just has to be 1 activity. We used to do 2, 1 second. For each of the goals. And then basically what I'm looking for in your session plan, oh, I don't know if you can look at that. I hate giving examples. So what we're doing is you're picking 2 goals, you're doing 1 activity for each goal. So 2 goals, 2 activities, 1 activity per goal. And then what you're doing on the plan. So basically it's divided up in columns. So this is a different type of session plan than maybe you've seen. You might have it in another class, but really these are some things that just polling other supervisors, what do we want to see? And really what I like about this particular session plan, it helps you kind of plan. So as all of you know, therapy is pretty dynamic. Oh, whoops, somebody's in the waiting room. Oh no, hold on. Nope, that's the chat. Yeah, it's different. It's 3. We used to make it bigger, but listening to feedback, that's too much. I'll fix that. So you have a session plan for fluency, for executive function, and for hearing impairment. Or excuse me, sorry. Stuttering, 1 second. 1 second, sorry. Like I said, this is my first semester, or we made some changes at the switch here. 1 second. Before I say that, one moment. Excuse me. Executive function, fluency, hearing impairment. Do those goals not align? 1 second. Let me say that one more time. Hearing impairment, fluency, and executive function. Hold on. Make sure that's in the right order. Yes. Sorry about that. Executive function, stuttering, fluency. Again, here's our words. 3 different words that mean the same thing, and hearing impairment. So 1 for each of those disorder. You pick 2 goals and 1 activity to address the goal. And what I like about the session plan, what I want you guys to be sure to think about. So here's what happens. You're gung-ho, you're getting ready for your session. So you're like, wow, okay, I got, 15 minutes of treatment. We're going to be addressing, here are 3 goals we're going to be addressing, are going to try, and I say try to address in a session, let's say. Okay, so how I'm going to be working on skill A. So you've got, usually, and then like when I say a session, sometimes we're only targeting 1 goal, sometimes we're targeting, 3, especially when we're looking at like outpatient clinic-based therapy. We usually try to hit on more than just 1 goal. And what you need is a plan. Okay, this is what I'm going to do first. All right, now I want to do, what am I going to do next? Okay, how am I going to make this harder? So sometimes what happens is you choose an activity to do to address the goal, and they just fly through it. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not ready for the next thing yet. And honestly, I'm not sure they know, or did they just get lucky, or did we do this already so they know the answer? All right, let me make it harder. How can I make this activity more challenging for the client? Or sometimes you have this wonderful, phenomenal thing planned and it's just too hard. It's just, we're striking out step 1, step 2, step 3. You're like, okay, so how do I make this easier? Like, how do I change it to make it more simple or simplify it? And that's like when you hear the word scaffolding, or when I think about breaking things down into steps. Okay, and sometimes what you find too is you start at where the goal is, and you realize, wow, they don't have all these foundational things, or hey, guess what? This was hard because they don't know this. So when we're looking at how do I help this client, I need to think on my feet. So that's what happens. So sometimes things just don't go as planned, and you have to adjust. You have to make it harder, or you have to make it easier. And how can I break this down, make it simpler? So there is a lot of that in a session. And if you haven't thought about it, sometimes that's where you can get kind of caught off guard. Or you know what, you just skip the goal and you go to the next thing. And truly, ideally, what you're looking for is you want to be able to address the goal. You want to be able to have things tailored for your client so you can address the goals that your supervisor made for you to follow in the session. So that's why I said, like, session plans, usually for me with my SLPAs, I'll come up with things. In fact, right now I'm working with my SLPA. I'm working on her coming up with things on her own, because I think she just doesn't have confidence in it. And I'm working on that with her a little bit. But, I'll give her things to do, and then she'll say, oh, gosh, they really couldn't do this. So it doesn't matter. I've been a therapist forever. I still come up with things and I'm like, oh, guess what? That was a disaster. That's not going well. And then she'll explain to me, hey, we started here, they couldn't do this. So I was doing we were doing this St. Patrick's Day kind of theme this week, and I had some different activities, and it's really targeting, like there was our TIC goals, it was all related to St. Patrick's Day, listening comprehension goals, WH question stuff. And she was telling me, well, we did this, but you know what? I had to really review all the vocabulary in this. This is really hard because the vocabulary was difficult for them, or they couldn't remember what these two words mean. So we spent 25 minutes working on them understanding what these two words meant. So that's the feedback that I'm always looking for from an SLPA. And also for her, I want her to explain it to me. Okay, hey, we know next time. Okay, so the next activity, she's got to prep, she's got to review vocab, she's got to kind of give them some more tangible practice interacting with the new vocabulary, so then we can go on to the next thing. So she was saying, comprehension really wasn't relevant. They still were not understanding what some of these words meant in this little like article thing. And I was like, oh, okay, good to know. So we discussed it. So that's what the purpose of that is. It's not like, oh, let's just give you more boxes or busy work. It's really what you will do in a session. And I know some of this is arbitrary because you haven't done it, but I will tell you, for instance, Nicole, I'll pick on Nicole. So she was my intern in the winter. She's done in December, and I got a couple new students that were new to me. So I wasn't familiar. I got an eval from somebody else that I didn't do. And she can tell you, I don't really like that, but really, truly, it was brand new. There's no reason to do another evaluation just because I didn't like it as a supervisor. So we were coming up with activities for these two new people that I didn't know. And so we were discussing it. We came up with some activities. So it was my first session and hers. So we went kind of through that, and the three things we had, they were disaster. And how, showing her really real time how this goes. Scratched it. Oh, okay, wow. Oh, and then I decided at that point, like, wow, I didn't really like this goal. Obviously, this goal was a little lofty for this particular person, and I needed to simplify it. Okay, how do we simplify it? So we talked about how you do that in real time. And that was the purpose in some of my assignments, where I'm like, how do you make it harder, or how to make it easier? Or we had one person just flying through the stuff, and she's like, gosh, when are we done in like 5 minutes? Okay, so now I'm going to have them go back, and then I'm going to have them do this. Or now they got to give me the whole sentence, and now they've got to explain it. Or now I need them to restate the information. So she was understanding more why that is that way. And I think it's hard sometimes for you guys to think that way when you don't have a client in front of you doing really well, or doing not as optimal as we would like. So definitely that's where that challenge is too. It's finding that fine line for our clients and how to challenge them in a good, what I would say, therapeutic way, versus helping. We don't want to help them, enable the either. We don't want to make them feel overwhelmed or defeated. So it's a fine line. So practicing making things harder, making things easier, that will help prepare you for therapy. So that's the purpose. So what a lot of people worry about is Kendra going to like my activity? This is what I'm going to tell you. There are plenty of activities I don't like, or I don't do for my own personal bias, but just because I don't like them, if you're doing your best to try to address the goal, that's what I'm judging. And for various reasons, there's certain things I just don't like to do just because my therapeutic style doesn't bode well for it, but that doesn't mean it won't for you. So I just try to look at, did you do a good attempt at addressing the goal? Okay, perfect, awesome, great. So those are just some things too that I'm just judging on, did you do a good attempt at addressing the goal for this particular client? And obviously, that's really the purpose of this. And you'll find too, as you guys do this, and maybe you've had experience just with, when I look at kids and adults alike, this isn't just to kids, but adults can have interests and things that they like to do. It doesn't necessarily mean they like to do them in therapy. So then there's that, or that's too much of a preferred activity. So then we're not really addressing the goals. or, hey, they know too much about this topic, so now they're going to nitpick certain things. So, you know, I'm not really a gamer or video game, but obviously I work with a lot of clients of various ages, young and old, who like that. So I try to, you know, tailor some things like that, and then they'll correct me the whole time. I'm like, okay, well, that's not really the purpose of that. So sometimes it just depends. And you guys, there's always trial and error, and it doesn't matter how many years you do this, there's always trial and error with regards to an activity. So the activity is just arbitrary, and hey, am I doing a good attempt at addressing the goal? So that's what I'm looking for. So for instance, in one of the goals, let me pull that up. Where you're going to get graded down for the activity, and I say graded down or points taken away, is if, let's look at fluency. One second, wrong thing, one moment. So goals for stuttering. We look at stuttering. Let me pick a goal here. So basically we're looking at child use of facilitating strategies. So that's one of their fluency strategies for 2 conversational turns while speaking to an adult or peer. Okay, so I set up this activity for us to have a conversation. All right, but if the activity isn't really trying to help facilitate a conversation, so like for instance, I remember somebody who wrote an activity like a naming task where they were just gonna, you know, do like what I would call more of like a word recall activity that was really addressing, I think, a different goal. I think they might have, I think when I finally figured it out, they were writing the wrong activity for the wrong goal, and they like had them reversed. So they did like what I would call rapid naming activity, where they're showing like the word associations type of thing. That didn't really facilitate a conversation. So there's certain tasks that you do in therapy that facilitate what I would call those open-ended interactions, but like a wrapping naming activity or kind of that word association, that wasn't going to really facilitate a conversation. So they got marked down on that. Or looking at rating. So a child will rate his levels of tension and levels of difficulty. Will rate his levels of tension and levels of disfluency following speaking activities. So looking at here, let's do a speaking activity. And oftentimes too, sometimes, especially in stuttering, it's arbitrary. Okay, here, we're gonna speak about, or oftentimes you find maybe a preferred topic. Okay, let's talk about that. Tell me, you know, 5 things I need to know. What was it my daughter was telling me today? Gosh, and I still work on her speech all the time, and we still don't have it. So she was telling me all about, you know, their monetary system. They call them Starbucks in her class, and I was explaining to her when I hear Starbucks, what I think about. And so she was explaining to me and just doing like a speaking task. I was like, okay, you know, tell me 3 things about Starbucks in your classroom that I wouldn't know. And so sometimes if the activity is attempting to address them having, you know, doing a little, what I would call monologue or, you know, a speaking task, that's what I'm looking for. Granted, maybe she doesn't want to talk about Starbucks, maybe, you know, but I'm attempting to getting her to talk about a topic and her to tell me kind of get that spontaneous speech. So that's what I'm looking for. Was there a good attempt of the activity to help address the goal? And as we know, you can come up with the best activity and it not work in a session, that's for sure. In fact, or sometimes what happens too is you start in one direction and you just get sidelined because of something else, but the activity still ends up being fine. Or, hey, we didn't really do it the way I wanted it, but we did it this way and that was fine. So that's really what I'm looking for. A good attempt at giving an activity to address the goal. That's what I'm looking for. If you won't get points for things if the activity isn't really trying to help facilitate the goal, or using the opportunity to practice the skill, or don't tell me, you know, perfect example is, for instance, let's say the goal, granted you're not gonna see that in this, but the goal is client will produce R in sentences, and then the task that you do is only at the word level. Well, you're not really addressing the goal in sentences if all you're doing is practicing the word level, at the word level. Or you say, hey, sentences aren't going well. How I'm going to make it easier is we're just going to do it at the word level or the syllable level. Or how I'm going to challenge them is, okay, now I'm going to give them a speaking task or try to facilitate a 1 or 2 minute speaking task. And we'll judge, you know, we'll do it, what I call a judging task. How was that R? How did it sound like? What is the visual I'm going to use to show them and give them feedback? So for instance, a lot of times I use it, not just in our TIC, I use it for a variety of reasons is, are we hitting our target? So oftentimes I'll tell a client, hey, this is our target. And I have a dartboard, this little magnetic one. I really like it because it's small, it's not huge. And I'll show them, hey, we're not at our target. We're over here. So I try to give them visual feedback sometimes on where the target is. And so it's things like that. That's what I'm looking for. Have you given some thought into how you're going to practice or facilitate the goal or work on the foundational skill to address the goal? So sometimes somebody might do an activity and you're trying to explain to me how this does relate, or sometimes I might need a little explanation. So usually if I feel like you're kind of there or I'm not really clear, sometimes I will ask you a clarifying question in the project. So always know if you're like, gosh, did she grade it? Always open it up and see if I have a comment, because oftentimes I won't give you a grade until you just kind of clarify something for me. And so those are some things. So fluency tasks. So we did the toolbox. So this is what I was looking for. That toolbox assessment is how are we going to help this client access some of those tools to help increase their fluency. So just a little bit of a disclaimer. I see we were kind of missing the mark. So I just want to just clarify a little bit for stuttering based on the assignments I was grading earlier is the tool strategy. So a tool, like I said, I use them a lot in fluency, but you might use them in our TIC. You might use them in other disorders. Here's your tool. Okay, I know if I do this, this, and this helps me remember, or this helps trigger me to use appropriate pacing. So for instance, oftentimes with fluency, it's about talking at a good pace. It's about pacing themselves. Okay, how am I going to practice that? What's the tool? And obviously, we might start with a visual. We might start with something where they're touching it and they're pacing as they go. Okay, well, generalizing that skill. Okay, so now I don't want them pointing at the pacing board or reading sentences using the pacing board. I want to take the pacing board away. So how am I going to facilitate that? So that's some of the other things too. What are the strategies that are going to work? So now we've got the skill of pacing, but obviously I'm not going to have them point to a board all the time when they speak, or, you know, that's not going to really generalize well outside of the therapy room. So how am I going to get them to practice proper pacing without the visual tool? Or, you know, how are they going to remember their timing? What are some other strategies I'm going to use? So oftentimes, especially in stuttering, we have to practice it. We have what I would call a toolbox where we know, hey, the pacing board helps me pace. Pacing is really the skill I'm working on, but this is just the tool I use to remind me to pace. And then obviously that tool is supposed to also then be used, you know, put away, so to speak, so they remember and can access and generalize it. So I might use a tool with language. I might use a tool with our TIC. So tools are kind of just arbitrary words that I say. It's a strategy that we use to help the client remember, utilize, you know, cue them. So it's not you, because you can't leave the therapy room with them and cue them all the time. Like, what's the cue? The cue is this, to remember to say your sounds correctly, or to use an appropriate pace, or remember those easy onset for those hard words when we want to say them. So that's what the tool assessment was. It wasn't, some of you went off in like activities and stuff, which is great. Hey, this is how I'm going to do this activity to teach them to use the tool. And some of you got away from you a little bit, but that's okay. You're thinking, okay, this is what I might do in a therapy session. And also too, when we're looking at stuttering, oftentimes too, we use pseudo stuttering to practice. So pseudo stuttering is also to help kind of take that fear, that connotation away. So it helps desensitize them a little bit. But the main purpose of using pseudo stuttering in therapy, where you have them stutter on purpose. So pseudo stuttering is stuttering on purpose. It's to help access and practice using the tools that you're teaching them to improve their fluency. So that's kind of why we do that activity for fluency. So looking at some of the other goals.
Can it also be called contrastive drills or something like that? I remember I was reading about that.
And contrastive drills is kind of what I would say that's more of a blanket term too, that you can use in a variety of ways. And when I usually think of artic-wise when we're using contrast, like those minimal pairs kind of things. So looking at some of this, so a lot of people are like, do we do this in speech? So a couple of people asked me this. Yeah, basically a lot of times, especially in some school-based stuff, really for our clients with a hearing impairment or clinic-based, definitely I worked on a lot of this in clinic-based. We need to help them utilize their technology, access their technology, make sure they know how their technology works, operates, maintenance. And also too is how do we self-advocate to use our technology? So a lot of times what we're working on with our hearing impairment, our clients with hearing impairment in a variety of settings is no amount of therapy is going to help them hear better. But if they're not using their technology, their assistive technology, they aren't going to benefit from their assistive technology. And therefore they're going to have some miscommunication. They're going to miss important things. Their language interaction, those things will decline. So yes, even as a speech therapist, will I work on people checking their hearing aids using their FM system? I might be following up with them, especially if they don't necessarily have services from other providers like Teacher of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Some of our clients now, for instance, cochlear implant, if they're using their cochlear implant, hearing isn't as much of a factor to them versus if they don't come to school with their cochlear implant. So that's a big problem. And there's going to be a lot more issues if they're not doing that. So yes, I do that. Hearing impairment by itself, we might work on some artic stuff, but again, if they're not wearing their technology, artic's really not going to be worth it to work on because we want to utilize the hearing that they have. And then also too, when we're looking at other things, there might be some language components that we're working on, and those are still present because of their hearing impairment of some kind. So oftentimes when I am working with somebody specific with a hearing impairment, these are the things we work on. Can they monitor themselves, that self-monitoring piece, self-advocacy piece, and then using the technology. Because oftentimes, especially in like a clinic or a school base, they might not be seeing the audiologist all the time. The audiologist is making sure things are working, their equipment is doing what it's supposed to do, but really the audiologist can't help them either if they're not wearing their technology. So we often as a team, when we're looking at oral rehab piece, be a person who's monitoring that, supporting that, teaching them how to do that. And trust me, if you do have anybody, clinic, home health, school-based, if they have a hearing aid, there is usually some kind of training and things that you can get from the audiologist. And oftentimes as they're older, especially when we're looking at our adults, so our group of adults who now require a hearing aid, we also need them using their technology. So this is a goal we will often do that is specific to hearing impairment, whereas other things related might be more what I would call general goals like language, pronouns, verb tenses, those kinds of things. And then executive function, making sure these goals, I think I changed these to last time. Yeah, so the goal, I just don't like how this looks, but this is kind of where this is our go-to. If you read, so you'll see they're kind of numbered, the goals are numbered. So I just don't like how this visually looks for you guys. But often to definitely work on this when we're looking at like number one, flexible problem solving. We do this a lot with our clients on the spectrum. It's that self-regulatory scripts, such as, you know, is this a big deal, little deal? Do you have a choice or no choice? Is this strict or not strict? Expected or unexpected? So definitely those kind of what I would call flexible problem solving skills we work on tremendously in our speech and language sessions with a variety of disorders. Definitely holds true for autism. And also too, it's anybody with any kind of communication disorder, always work on that self-advocacy and self-monitoring piece. Okay, what am I missing? Did I misunderstand? How do I self-check? How do I check in with people to make sure they understand me? So if you're struggling with the goals, hopefully you find one that you like, that you can maybe kind of conceptualize. But these are all goals I have done in some capacity. I don't think there's been anything on any of these goals that I haven't done to some extent. And oftentimes too, when we're looking at some of these specific goals, your supervisor will cue you into what's the specific things. So just know, oftentimes these, like I said, these are just arbitrary goals, but when you have the whole client, you have their eval, you have the concerns, you know what they've been working on with other therapists and in other ways, because oftentimes it's not just speech by itself. There's usually a team that you're working with. So definitely too, doesn't matter the disorder, we're usually always working on that self-monitoring, self-evaluating piece, because that's what's important. That's how we get people to hold themselves accountable and also monitor themselves and know, do I need more support? Am I not understanding? Do they understand me? That kind of stuff. So, like I said, if you really don't like a particular goal, move on to the next one. You should, I think I put enough in here for you guys to have a variety of things to choose from. And oftentimes too, when I look at someone's like, oh gosh, how do we in speech and language therapy work with, you know, expected and unexpected? And that's more practice. That's where that repetition of things. Okay, here's scenario. Here, what scenario might happen in their life? So for instance, perfect example, and I do use this verbiage quite a bit with my own children. Just for example, my almost 4-year-old, my twins are gonna be 4 St. Patrick's Day. So gosh, they're getting up there already. He's having a meltdown about, you know, he can't get his shoe off, or he's having a meltdown about something not worth having a meltdown. I'm like, okay, how do we solve this problem? What do we do? Or if, you know, my kids are bickering with each other, I'm like, okay, what's the real problem? How do we solve that? What are the steps? So oftentimes too, when we're looking at some of these problem solving, planning, organizing, it's really about working in a sequence. What's first, what's most important, what's the priority, and moving down the continuum. So just know that if you're like, gosh, I don't know how to do this goal, you can always send me a message and I can give you some feedback too on what does this goal really look like. Yeah, like child will request help when tasks are difficult. So oftentimes the way they communicate help is they throw a tantrum or hit somebody or throw something or scream at the top of their lungs. Okay, we're usually working on what we would call the communication piece. Okay, you need help. This is how we ask for help. This is how, when you're feeling frustrated or when you're angry, these are the things we can say. So definitely sometimes the goal is written, what I say goofy. And when I say goofy goal, oftentimes goals are written, again, in an arbitrary way to address either behavior or address a need in a certain way. But really, that's what this goal means. So any questions there, you please send me a message. But yes, so 3, there's a plan for each. And then I do give you guys a little extra time. So I'll update the due date. If any of you are gone next week, please, you need an extension, let me know right away. I do know spring break's starting to come up here in the next week or so for many people. So please just inform me of that. Please not on Sunday before it's due, but yeah, I'll give you guys probably till the following Wednesday. So I'll update the due date, and yes, it's only 3, it's not 4. So someone else, I will fix that. Any other questions?
I have a question about the data collection part of it. I was looking at the example that you posted and I was a little bit confused about
I know. I
what it
hate, this is why I don't post examples.
Can
People always
you-
want them because, okay, this is what I'm looking for. What are you going to keep track of? I'm not really looking for a data sheet. I'm not really looking for any sophisticated circles, checks, minuses, pluses. What data are you going to be keeping? So you're doing an activity. So for instance, let's say I'm doing like what number 4 here is child will verbally explain why some tasks are easy or difficult for him. Okay. All right. So I'm picking the activity. What am I keeping track of? What am I really, quote unquote, keeping data on? Am I keeping how they can explain why certain things are easy or hard? I've given 5 scenarios. They were able to explain what was easy or difficult. Am I really keeping track? You know, oftentimes too, this is what we see happen is in a given scenario, they do great. In an actual scenario, and usually what I do is I sabotage. I might give them an activity. I know they don't have something. Say they need to do an activity and they need scissors or markers or crayons, and then I don't have them available and they need to ask me. Were they able to ask? Were they able to explain? Why is this difficult? Well, I don't have the materials I need to complete the task. Okay, great, awesome. So then I keep data. So I might say I'm keeping data on, could they verbally explain what was missing? Did they verbally explain why they needed it to complete the project? Did they verbally explain why it's a problem and how to solve it? So what I'm looking for is I need you thinking about what actually am I keeping track of? So here's the goal, here's the activity, and what am I exactly taking data on? So oftentimes people think it's just about a yes or no, and I'm not always looking for yes, no, I'm looking for, did they give me a reasonable understanding? Did they demonstrate that they understood? Do they understand they have the concept? They still might need to work on other things. So sometimes, you know, especially when we're doing more what I would call expressive tasks, I think it's always kind of defining with my SLPA, okay, what are we keeping track of? Or like she'll say, like, I know my SLPA, she hates yes, no question goals. She's like, okay, well, I'm not real sure how to keep data on this. And we have a discussion about it. So what I'm looking for is, do you know what you're keeping track of? I don't care about pluses, minuses, or any kind of data. I think you guys talk about that in other, oh gosh, 217, I think. I can't think off the top of my head where you talk about data tracking. What I'm looking for is, do you know what data you're going to track? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, that's why I don't like samples, because people they want it to look like that. And actually I might just take that down, because I don't want it to necessarily look exactly like that. I want you to really show me, okay, this is what you're doing. You're gonna be thrown to the fire. You're gonna work on these goals. Here's a task I'm picking to do. Okay, how am I gonna keep track of this? Or why am I gonna do this task? What am I measuring within that time frame? Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, I got 1 minute or it's gonna kick us all off. So, all right, guys. If you have any other questions, please send me a message and I'll update the due date.